Thanks, Kaylee. Thank you very much. Hey, thanks everybody for being here. Those of you who know me know that I detest PowerPoint, but sometimes you have to sell your soul to the devil and participate. So there is a PowerPoint here. There are a few words on it. I'm going to try and not read best I can. But first off, thank you all for being here. I remember the first Accelerate DSM in this space and how fun it was to have the conversations that continue to this day. So from Accelerate to Monetary to all of the other community events that take place, thank you for being here. Thank you for participating. Thank you for adding what you're doing right here through conversations. I'll go way back for a second, not to 2001, but 1987, first freshman class in computer science at Central. And the professor's first advice was, before you start writing your code for the projects, write every procedure and write the comments for every procedure. Because if you write the comments and the documentation for every piece of code, you're going to have the code work because you would have thought through it. So when Mike asked me to do this presentation, and he said, give me a title, I gave him a title. I hadn't thought through the rest of it yet. So the title of the presentation today is different than the title of the presentation in your packet because I failed to follow my freshman computer science 101 advice. So the what and why will become clearer as we go through. Those of you who know me, again, you know that I like stories, and so I'm going to begin with a story. If you were a nerd in the late 80s, early 90s, and you got your computer, you didn't buy it pre-assembled. You could buy it pre-assembled from IBM or Dell or anybody else, but if you were a nerd, you built it. You bought the parts, you bought the case, you bought everything and put it together. And sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. That was the fun. So I built that first in college. As I left college and started my first job, I was still building computers like I'd been doing for professors in college. Now I was doing it for other people. At that moment in time, you could make a couple $100 putting a computer together, which took about a half hour. So that's pretty good billing rate in 1991 and 92. It probably is even today. $400 an hour would be good right now. But I built that a lot. And it was good enough business that as time progressed, I found that I was actually able to make more money building those computers and writing code for people and training Excel and Word that I didn't need the job anymore. So I left. In that process, one of the contracting jobs I had was for Iowa Realty, pulling cables through Iowa Realty offices. And so I'm pulling network cable one night, and the IT manager for the Iowa Realty corporate office at 35th Street in West Des Moines is beating his head against 3 or 4 computers that he's purchased. None of those computers will display the video, the 3D video rendering of homes that Iowa Realty wanted to sell. Now, gamers in the room know the problem wasn't the computer. The problem wasn't the CPU. The problem wasn't the power supply. The problem was the video card. None of the pre-built machines had the right video card. So I said, how about I bring you a computer that'll show this, and if I can show this tomorrow, you buy these computers from me. Ron agreed, and within a short period of time, I had an order for 400+ computers to outfit every Iowa Realty office. It was the video cards. So between buying computers or cases from China and video cards from ATI in California and the Dove Bar mouse from Mexico City, I had a basement full of parts that were getting assembled by my wife, me, and a couple other friends. And we made a lot of money, 15 grand on those computers. Now think about the time. This is the same time when Dell is assembling computers at a very similar pace, only they're doing that many computers in an hour. Because what Michael Dell did just 2 years before me having this epiphany was to start thinking that if the IBM PC is selling for $4,000, I can sell the Dell PC for 2 because I can build it cheap enough. It's the same thought process I had. $1,500 parts, $1,700 sale, $200. What was the difference? I was focused on West Des Moines and Urbandale. He was focused on the globe. So that's where the thesis of this conversation comes from. As you read the title of my presentation, you might think I'm going to downplay the value of small businesses. No, I'm not. I'm not here for that. But depending on what type of business we're building, we have to think and dream and execute at that scale. Dell was right, and I was right. Dell achieved its goals. I achieved my goals. The PCs paved the way for the next chapter in my life. And I'm happy for it. I would not go back and change it. I would not go back and try and figure out how I could beat Dell. A lot of companies tried that and failed. Their dreams probably weren't right, but their execution was probably even more wrong. So that's where I would begin. Going back to the time that Kaylee's talking about with Startup City, me coming into the newly named startup community, a big definition to try and figure out was, what is a startup versus what we've been always reading about as small businesses? What's the difference? And the best definition actually came from, I'm going to leave all of these up here, so PowerPoint gurus know that I should have transitioned these. I don't believe in transitions. See it up here, because that's not what I'm going to read anyway. Those are just highlights. But a startup is a massive company that just doesn't know it yet. What does that mean? They want to grow bigger. They will be bigger. They are hallucinating. Yes, yes, yes. But think about it. Every startup seems to have a CEO and a CTO and a CFO. But how often does that CFO know what's on their tax return? 0. Those of us who look at that world, know that the CFOs of the startups are the ones who are writing the checks. That's it. They are bookkeepers with the inflated title, but it's not a negative. The inflated title is not the negative. It's the dream that's the positive. They're thinking as if they're going to be massive someday. And if they were massive, what does the CTO do? Sets the entire technology direction. Today, what does the CTO of a startup do? Figures out the hack to fix the Facebook problem after API changes. That's not what the CTO of any large corporation is doing. In fact, they wouldn't even know which API stack is being used for authentication today. So that's one of the things. But a startup also doesn't know what product's going to work. They have an idea. That product idea is shifting on almost a daily basis. They're testing those theories. They are validating it. How are they validating it? They're talking to people. A startup that is not talking in a room like this about their product to people is shooting for disaster because they have no idea where the blind spots are. The blind spot removal is the socialization process for a startup. A small business, on the other hand, is keeping almost everything confidential and quietly discussing amongst its own people. Andrew and I were just talking about some of these bullets. A startup can do a lot with a tiny number of people because they're solving a particular problem, and the problem is shifting on almost a daily basis. Again, I'll go back to Andrew. What is a startup's overhead? Co-working space, computers, beer, transportation, occasional flowers for the better half who is sick and tired of long hours spent at the co-working space. But they have low overhead, but they want to scale that. The gaming startups know this, but really, a startup is trying to change the game for everybody. They are saying every single model in place today is subject to change. Everything is open to change. What's a small business doing instead? I'll give you a second to read and contrast in your own head for a second. A lot of the same stuff, but with a different focus. Starting bottom up, a small business is a part of the backbone of this country's economy. Without small businesses, none of us would be here, right? I think most of us know that fact. And that's because small businesses are employing people, paying people a market wage, which a startup cannot afford to do. They are. Dan, you can have the slide deck. You don't have to take pictures. A small business is always adding revenue at a decent clip. And the reason for that decent clip is because they're worried about making sure payroll happens, customers remain happy, and their own lifestyle works. In the startup world, a lifestyle business is almost taken as a negative. But what is a lifestyle business? What if I want to go home at 5 o'clock? That's my call. I want to live a life where I'm at my kids' practices every night. That's a lifestyle. What's wrong with that? In the startup world, that's a negative. But in the small business world, that is the reason you're in business. So I'm going to say that there is space for both. A startup's goal is to keep pivoting fast enough that they don't fail. Now, over that period of time, a small business on the other side is reducing their chances of failure continuously, because every single day a small business is in business, they're likely to remain in business for a longer period. Again, I'll let you read some of these adjectives for a second. They will be important for the next part. But why are you in business? I didn't make these up. I read them from many entrepreneurs' slide decks as to why they're in business. Narcissism is a big thing in this business because you have to believe you're going to change the world, right? To be a game changer, you got to be better than everybody else. So narcissism is part and parcel. Humility is taught. Narcissism is what we walk in with. All right, now that you know those. About a week and a half ago, I think, I saw this pitch land as a part of Sequoia Capital's news release in one of my news feeds. And Dropbox, 11 years ago, pitched to Sequoia and others for a $6 million raise. That was their second seed round, 1.2 million total. Sequoia was a part of it. I cannot do justice to the words of the entrepreneurs who presented this. So I'm actually not going to say what's on the slides because what they would have said is different. But I'd like you to see the slide deck. Read the words. You don't have to read 100%. Just get the feeling relative to the adjectives you just read. A payday, narcissism, change the world, big dreams, things like that. So I'm going to slowly go through this pitch so you can get a chance to absorb it. We're still doing that, by the way. This is important. This is 2007. They have raised very small seed round of $15,000 before this point. And for the 1.2 million raise, they are giving you a full demo across all platforms. There's no pedigree there, nothing special. In fact, most startups today would not dare put a photo like that on their slide deck. Since I subscribe to a different service, I'm still in the freemium model since way back when. So that was a slide deck. 2007, $15,000 raised by the company so far. That's the audacious presentation they made to Sequoia for money. First round, $1.2 million. They were a startup. They were saying our software replaces every solution that's out there, including SneakerNet, including email, including websites. We are anytime, anywhere, wherever you want to be, your files will be there with you. They simplified the entire problem. Microsoft Windows at that point had a product like that called Briefcase. Those of you in this room who used it know how crappy it was. It never worked. Never worked. I lost more files to Briefcase than I've lost probably to hard drive failures. However, they fixed it. 15 grand. They did it. That's what's important. That's the startup. What if Dropbox had been a small business? Would it have acted any differently in 2007? Anyone? Yeah, they would have. They probably would have started like me, West Des Moines or Urbandale. Whose problem can I fix? It'd be custom code. It would have different firewall rules. It might even be focused just on the corporate market, like Box.net, which came out right about the time, actually had a pretty good product, but could never scale to Dropbox's scale. They never had the evangelist that Dropbox did. That's an important classification. Box made money. OneDrive makes money. Dropbox just makes a lot of it. So those of you in this room who would classify yourselves as a startup founder, answer those questions for yourself. Can you make changes to your entire business model if your business model failed? Would you be willing to shut down your company? So at the same time Kaylee and I were introduced, I had a startup called PikuZone. It was a company whose goal was to provide safe, secure, whitelisted email for kids under 12 years old. In 2012, that was still a thing that kids under 12 could use email. It didn't work. I had a couple thousand customers, unrelated to me, so none of those customers who were paying bills were friends or family. They were real people out in the real world. And I couldn't figure out why the parents I would talk to or the markets we would talk to, so Homeschool Association, we talked to churches, talked to moms and dads in various places. People who bought into it really bought into it. Their kids were using this platform a lot. Kids who didn't, or parents who didn't, completely rejected it. So you try to do research, right? So I started testing my hypotheses. Parents should be concerned about their kids' email or electronic communication. Why aren't they? I wasn't getting an answer to that, so I started going, why are the ones concerned who are paying me real dollars? So I would go to my sign-up page, look at the person who recently paid me for the account. Almost all happen to be mothers. Almost all, once I check LinkedIn, almost all happen to have a degree beyond a bachelor's degree. Almost all were in blue states. Almost all seem to have a type of degree that would probably make them over a couple $100,000 a year. So they had disposable income, they were thinking a certain way, they belonged to a certain gender demographic. So I decide I'll go back to my two marketing channels, Google ads and Facebook ads. Shut down Google ads for a day and just go to Facebook filters. And I started putting those demographics in. Facebook comes back and says, I have 32,000 potential moms who I can address with this market. There's a few people in this room who know what I did right after that, within the hour after that. I shut the site down. I refunded the money that was there. The market was tiny. It wasn't worth wasting time. So are you willing to abandon the decisions that don't work? Are you willing to go the extra step to figure out who your customer is, get into their head, and see why they're buying your product. That's a hard thing to do. For sitting down with founders, and a few of you who are mentors in this room, mentors and counsel in this room, who go through that tough conversation of saying, maybe this business needs to go away, and you start focusing on something else. That's a hard, hard, hard decision. But we have to do that. Otherwise, we lose the opportunity to try and come up with the next product that could change the world. And that's the key. We have to imagine the whole world using our product. Again, a few in this room were at the conference, Big Omaha conference in 2011, when Travis presented the idea of Uber on stage. Of the 300 or 400 people in the room, me included, many of us giggled at that, remember? We all did. And I swear all of us have the Uber app on our phones right now. And we've used it. He wanted to change the world. He wasn't worried about how we were laughing about it. He just wanted to do it. He tested the hypotheses. He failed at several, including ethical ones, maybe. But ultimately, the product succeeded. So we have to think through some of those filters as we're going through creating our strategy. Similarly, there are filters that apply to us as small business owners. I've spent more of my life as a small business owner than a startup person. And that first one is key. Talk to any small business owner, they are talking about profitability. Even if it's $1, they're wanting to make the dollar. I was doing that with the Dell computers. I wanted to have every single computer give me revenue. I wasn't looking to lose money on every deal and hope to make it up in volume. I couldn't do it. There's no way. I couldn't afford it. Didn't have anybody's money. Anybody want to add anything to this? What else do you know as a characteristic of a startup, small business owner, sorry? It's got to be somebody who's a small business owner in here. How many startup founders in this room? Okay, small business owners. A lot more. What else would you add? What else defines you? I know you're not narcissistic, most likely. So what else defines you? What's important to you? Freedom. Awesome. What else? Your community is local. A startup's community is global. That's critical. To understand the global customer, we have to look differently. Just like to be a business within a community, we have to think differently. So on behalf of all the guides, the counselors, the mentors, the friends, the angel investors, the board members, what else? What other characteristics define us? I would ask the startup founders and the small business owners to think, what is your right choice? Any of us who give you that answer, any of us, is hallucinating. We don't know what the right choice is for you. Because we are placed at a point in time that has passed. You are defining your business from this point forward. So whether you're a startup founder, whether you're a startup continuer, whether you're a CTO in a startup, whether you're the bookkeeper in a small business, only you know who you are. Mike doesn't know that, Kelly doesn't know that, Chris and Joe don't know that. Only you know that. So take the headphones off, shut off the phone, leave it in your office, go for a walk, and figure out if any of these characteristics, either of them, not any, but either of them apply to you. Because to be a startup founder, you have to dream massive. You can't dream small. You can't think about 1,000 users. You can't think about 10,000 users. You're thinking about millions of users, one person at a time. You're still building one person at a time. So to dream big, we have to think, we have to plan, We have to scale. We have to pivot. Or we have to be consistent in our execution. So if you're a startup founder and you're dreaming for a massive payday, first, start with what doesn't scale. Mike's common question for most startups in this room is, who's your first customer? Not the first 10, not the first 100, first. Who is the unrelated person who will buy your product from you and give you money? That's a customer. Until then, you don't have a business. All you have is an idea. As you read those, the last one, or second last one, there is a self-delusion we place on ourselves when we keep raising money from outsiders. It becomes a Ponzi scheme for ourselves. We keep giving away a little bit at a time, spinning in place without really shifting our business to scale. So pivot if you have to. Don't pirouette. Don't go into a self-delusion of other people's money constantly letting you churn. That doesn't work, that doesn't scale, that just doesn't take you to success. As you read those, I think there's a common element. I think you'll see it. Hire slow, fire fast. That's not a very popular sentiment. Most people, most of my friends or mentees agree with. But hire slow. Take your time. It's very expensive mentally, to fire somebody. It's very easy to hire. So take your time. Get to know the person. There's far too many startups I know who have had to let go a co-founder. I've gone through co-founder divorce myself. It's bad. It's never comfortable. So hire slow. Any other common element? Anybody want to take a shot at what the common element is across others? Pardon me? Money. Far too many people think that the things to outsource day one have to do with money. You have to understand your business. The only way you're going to understand your business is to hold that check in hand and enter it once or twice into your accounting system. See what happens to that money. See where the money flows. See what a P&L looks like. Why does a P&L look like the way it does? What happens with the balance sheet? What are the core categories? You have to learn that. You can outsource it when you're at scale. But at first, do things that don't scale. Learn your business. Cash is king. Without cash, you're dead. Or starved, both maybe. So learn your business. QuickBooks is easy. It's $149 to buy the product. Learn to use it. And when you're ready, outsource that work. Because at scale, outsourcing makes sense. At 1 or 2 customers, 10 checks a month, outsourcing doesn't make sense. In either mode, always tell the truth. Especially when you're raising money, especially when you're sitting next to counsel, especially when you're sitting next to your accountant. That's not the place to hide. And those of you who are married, that truth extends to your spouse, because whether or not they're in business with you, they are in business with you. Never lie there, because the moment you start lying there, lies will start flowing down to employees and customers. And ultimately, that's where you're lost, because reputation is king with a small business or a startup. So tell the truth. Many would say, under promise, over deliver. I would simplify. The promise you make is the promise you keep. So don't promise if you can't keep a promise. But then deliver, please. The last 2 are important. Screwing with employees' money, paychecks, taxes, other than the illegal elements of it, it's also wrong. The moment you start running your business with employees' money is the day you start to go down. And I hope you do. If you're screwing with employees' money, I don't want to be in business with you. I don't want to be your customer. I don't want to be your friend. I don't want to be a colleague or a mentor. That's the place to really screw things up. And ultimately, never, other four-letter word. I'm not Ben Mill, I can't go there. Other four-letter word, never mess with those two agencies. They are unforgiving and have unlimited amounts of capital to go after you. You can't win against them. And ultimately, I'll leave you with this. Kaylee, I have no idea how much time I took or had, but I'm happy to take any questions on this presentation, startup space, startup community, or any other. It's truly your time. Until Kaylee says off stage, I'm happy to be here.
Please ask any questions that you might have. We'll bring the microphones to you so you can raise your hand. Anything is game.
I'll take the first question.
Sure.
Over here, Tej, it's Mike.
Yep. Lights were bright.
Yeah.
I'm not used to this.
That's okay. So one of the things I'd like to have you talk about, from your opinion, is product scope when it comes to thinking big, both for the entrepreneur that's trying to build a giant startup and also for the small business person. Relate product scope to I'm thinking big.
So startups and small businesses differ in scope quite a bit. In a startup's case, startup decides what they think the market needs, generally because the market doesn't know what it needs yet. So the startup is saying, I'm going to build this. By starting here, my goal is to go that far. How do they go from here to here? Through those conversations. But they have to start focused, they have to start small. So whatever the first promise is, you got to deliver to that promise and then keep scaling. So the product scope in the dream has to be massive, and execution has to be tight. On a small business side, it's actually not your scope. It never was, it never will be your scope. It's always the customer scope. Because in that mode, we cannot afford to take the risk to design, pivot. We have to deliver, and grow with the customer. Whether we're in a custom programming space or in delivery of a product, we have to look at what the customer is asking for at the onset. In the startup space, the customer is redefining our scope as we grow, as the customer realizes what they need. So that's one place I would begin with scope. Scope creep is natural for all of us, especially us techies who know we can do what we want to do. So we naturally want to add scope because we think we can do it. That's a dangerous place. We have to get to the point of promise, deliver, promise, deliver, promise, deliver. That's where I would begin, Mike.
Thank you. Here's your one chance, guys. He's hard to get to these days.
Hi. I was wondering if you could speak on any difference in failure rates between small business and startups. I mean, traditionally, if you're making an investment with a higher potential return, like a startup, you would expect higher risk. But I was doing some research during your presentation, and I didn't really get any concrete figures as to whether or not startups are inherently a lot more risky than small businesses.
So when you're, okay, so the key question there is, I think, so correct me if I misinterpret your question. First, is there a true difference in failure rates between startups and small businesses? On day one, at the onset of the business, the risk for any business to fail is high, right? A small business's risk to fail decreases over time because they're in that continuous delivery and revenue mode. If they're not achieving the revenue, the cost of running that small business is so high because of payroll, because of office space, because of furniture, benefits, all of that stuff, that their risk goes from some number to 100% almost immediately. A startup is running on a shoestring budget. It has a runway that it can last a little bit longer by being hungrier for a little bit longer. You can't do that with employees in a small business. So on day one, the startups and small businesses' rate of failure is probably very close. But over time, the small businesses' rate of failure decreases. And once you've made that 5-year mark, you really have to screw up at that point. Probably immigration and IRS will be your catalyst to lead toward that failure.
Tej, good stuff. Question for you, because now you're inside of a large enterprise, and I assume periodically when you're a principal, you have startups come and kind of pitch that they want to do business with you, and you've also been on the startup side. What coaching would you have for startups who are trying to sell to or work with larger enterprises? What things do you see us, misstep or screw up when we go to approach larger enterprises, or any coaching there?
Thanks. That was an awesome question, Casey, because that was the question that led to my original thesis, but somehow I abandoned it along the way, so I'm glad you took me back a few weeks. What advice would I give a startup? First, think at that corporation's scale of buying and executing on the product. So when we are a startup, when we have the startup hat on, we know that we can implement a solution within 2 days, maybe even shorter. But it takes us sitting in a corporate environment longer than that to pull Kleenex out of the box, let alone wipe the nose. So we have to think of the scale. What is the scale you're coming into? It's the scale of decision making, the scale of purchasing, the scale of customers. If you came to Principal with a retirement product, you have to think about the universe of retirement products that Principal is selling. And at the same time, is your product even in the critical priorities list? I didn't know this. Honestly, I did not. This was a massive blind spot for me until December 19th. I started at Principal on the 18th. On the 19th, I realized that of all the counseling I'd given to every one of the GIA startups, I never asked any of them to go pull Principal's annual report or the quarterly earnings calls and listen to them and see what was Principal's need. The startup was just selling its product. It never, ever, in my history, never did the startup look at the company's need to try and match the product. So I would say if a corporate entity is your target, and they happen to be a public company, look at their annual report. Listen to the last 4 earnings calls. You're going to have more keywords delivered to you in those earnings calls and the annual report than you could fill your PowerPoint with. If they're a private company, you got to do a little more digging. You have to look at LinkedIn. You have to look at their websites. You have to talk to customers. Employees and customers. So I would say do a little more research. I wish I had said that. I had known that and said that to the startups at the GIA. I didn't. I had no idea. But thank you for that question. That's critical in any sales approach. And as a startup, we just don't even know what we don't know, right? Other thoughts, questions, disagreements? I'm happy to take disagreements. I have thick skin. My drinking buddy's going to ask now, so this is hard.
Yeah, so I'm actually going to turn your slide back on you and say, you've been involved in small businesses, you've been involved in startups, you're now involved in the enterprise. Which were the businesses that best reflected the real you? And that real you might have been different at those times, but which were those businesses that you were involved in that you really feel reflected the best you?
Anybody done the Berkman Assessment in this room? 1, 2, all right, 3 people. Berkman Assessment it's an assessment of who you are, what you see in others, and what you expect out of others. And I did that as a part of the Ballet Des Moines board, actually. And in there, I learned that I like to be a quiet, shy, thinking person looking at numbers, but I prefer to work in environments like this that make me uncomfortable. This is not the real me. I like to be sitting in a quiet, introspective place and doing some work. So the place where I was happiest that I know of in the last 26 years was probably in front of a database console doing analytics myself. Today, I happen to be leveraging some of that by working with my closest peer and partner at Principal is the Chief Analytics Officer. So he and I end up having more conversations on analytics. So it's taking me back to what I used to do, but neither of us has our fingers on a keyboard where we can actually write a query ourselves. So that was a comfort place. I miss that comfort place, but I am where I am right now. Kaylee.
Tej, you mentioned that Dropbox only raised 15 grand in their original round. You and I get asked a lot about how much money should we raise, and you know, I had somebody the other day came in and said, well, I was told to raise as much as I possibly could, so I didn't have to go back and raise later. In talking about scaling these giant businesses, I think it's important maybe to hear from you, okay, I want to build something global, massive, how much money should I be raising and why?
So I think this goes back, Mike. The question being, how much should I raise for the dream I have? Why? And and maybe you didn't ask this, but an extension to that question would be, can I fully convince the potential investors of my full dream if I'm asking for a small amount of money or a certain amount of money? How much should you raise? I go back to the bullet that said, promise and deliver. What can you promise? What can you deliver? I think back to WorkHound. As Andrew and Max were about to launch WorkHound, they were at an accelerator. And I think the first release of your product on the mobile screen had one question. They were talking about behavior change and employee retention, employee motivation through a Q&A process, a constant communication process. They delivered that with one question. They probably didn't even need $100 to present that question on a mobile screen. So what is the first promise, and can you deliver it? Start with that money. There are others in this room who started with different levels of money and were able to deliver to their first promises. The first promise leading to the first customer who actually paid a bill. I know all of you in this front of the room who've done that. You know that. So what is the right amount of money? The one that delivers your first promise to the first customer. That first customer or the first investor, once they see that delivery, they're likely to write you a check 10 times as large because they saw that you delivered. Many of the large raises that never get to delivery are the ones where trust breaks down. So that's the first place I would begin. To the founder, I would say, when you ask for a small amount of money, you're giving up a very small sliver of your company. Let the investor know why you're doing that. They know why you're doing that. You know why you're doing that. So put it on the table. And just say that I'm coming back to you once I deliver this with a lot larger raise for a lot bigger dream. Here's the dream, but I'm not ready for it yet, and you're not ready for it yet. More importantly, the customers aren't ready for it yet. So promise, deliver, and then go back and ask for the money. Did that answer your question, Mike? Kaylee, you had one.
I really do have a question. So I'm curious to know, you talked about the characteristics of a startup founder versus the characteristics of a small business owner. Can you talk about when you're hiring people, are there different characteristics that a startup founder should look for in a new hire versus the characteristics that a small business owner should look for in a new hire?
What's the magic bullet when hiring in a startup versus a small business? A startup team is dating on almost a daily basis. They're living together, they're eating together, they're failing together, they're succeeding together. What you're looking for there is common passion, some common interest in fixing the problem through a solution. that you all buy into. It's not a job, it is a vision that you're trying to deliver on. So I look for, in a team member, I would look for curiosity, to keep asking questions. A startup team that just agrees with the founder's dream is likely doomed for disaster. They have to be challenging the founder's dream because the customers and investors are challenging the founder's dream. In a executing business, whatever the executing business may be. So this could be a startup that's now at a normal clip, it's at a run rate, it's volunteer local with 10 years behind it. You know what the business needs, you know what the customers need. For you, now you're looking for somebody to execute your vision, the business's vision, the written vision, and where you're going. So at the early stage, you want flexibility, you want the ability to pivot, you want the ability to question, you want the ability to challenge. But I think that'll shift as soon as the business begins to mature. Stories, right? So stories, this is something I saw at a startup weekend-like event. I say like because it wasn't a startup weekend branded event. But I was one of the judges, and the team, 7 or 8 individuals, came up to the front, presented an awesome company that they had developed over the last 52 hours. So awesome that there was no way that anybody else needed to win against that team. None, 0. A few people asked a question from the audience. Someone from the judges panel asked a question. The guy who was listing himself as the CEO of that team said something, a team member started to say something, and he says, "Stop, that's not the answer, this is the answer." Disqualified. Why? Curbs, you're a startup weekend facilitator. What did that show us? If you don't have respect for your team, you don't deserve to be in that business. At that startup level, you are family. And if you can't respect your team, leave. The investor, when they see that, they do the exact same thing. They close the checkbook. Other questions? Well, I think you may have deserved a break already. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for constantly thinking about what business can be. It's through business that we grow. It's through business that this community exists. It's through you all that the startup community exists. So please come back. Please participate in more events. And if any of you are ready to launch a startup weekend in Des Moines, that's a guy who can get you started. Guy with probably the biggest beard in the room. But we need one of those startup weekend events badly. It needs somebody with the vision, somebody with the spirit. Execution is sitting in the room. They'll be able to do that for you. So thank you. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you, Tej.